All right, this video is going to be setting up your workspace as well as making some preference changes in the master preference file for InDesign. When you first open InDesign, you're going to get this what's new, and if InDesign updates, you're also going to get this what's new, and it just basically tells you anything that is new in this new version of InDesign. I'm going to close out of this because I don't need this. And this is a new computer for me, so I have to set everything up from scratch for InDesign. That's one, unfortunately, one negative thing is that the workspaces aren't saved across computers, which would be nice, but they are not. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some changes to my preferences, okay? So if you go to Edit, Preferences. Now, do not have a file open, okay, which is very important because when you make changes to the preferences, they are only for that file. And if you don't have a file open, then it makes changes to the preferences across the board. All right, so we're just going to go to Preferences and we're just going to go to the General tab. We're actually going to look through all of these different ones. Okay, so the General tab is some basic things. You don't have to make any changes on this one. You can come back and look at these, all the different things later as you become aware. You might want to change set content aware fit. You can try that. That's fairly new. I'm going to decheck it for now because I usually don't have that on, but I might come back to that. There are situations where you may want to have InDesign automatically expand your text frames to fit content that you've placed from a Word document. Sometimes when there are images in a Word document, the images are actually wider than the text frame, and the document will not show all the rest of the content after that image. So I'm going to play around with this later, and I will tell you whether you should select that at a later date. Okay, the interface. I don't typically keep. I don't typically update. I keep everything as the default. So you can definitely play with this based on your own preferences. UI scaling, I keep the default on that. For type, it's very important that you have it set to use typographer quotes. What typographer quotes are the curly quotes that actually hug the letters. And for book design, that is very important. We don't want straight quotes. We want the curvy quotes, which are typographer quotes. It used to be where this wasn't set as the default, and I may have already updated it. I'm not sure, but just make sure that is checked. Everything else is fine up at the top. Down at the bottom, make sure you have Smart Text Reflow, okay, checked, and add pages to the end of the story. I typically don't limit to primary text frames, and then I delete empty pages, okay? So those are important. We may come back and choose this, but for now, just leave that unchecked. But definitely delete empty pages and add pages to the end of story with the Smart Text Reflow checked. Advanced type, I don't ever make any changes to that typically across the board. Composition, I do show H&J violations. That may be distracting to you, but I do typically show that. Also, you want to be able to see substituted fonts where you have a missing font and substituted glyphs. Okay. Let's see. Text wrap we don't need to worry about. All that's fine. Units and increments. This is a matter of personal preferences. I prefer viewing everything in inches. It's what I'm used to. Stroke, I do set to a point, and I keep all the other defaults the same. Okay, so the only thing I change on this is inches, 2 inches. Grids, we are not going to worry about as a master setting. Once we get into individual documents, we will talk about the grids. So you will maybe occasionally want to adjust your grid. Guides and pasteboards, I never make any changes outside of the default. The dictionary, just make sure you are using whatever language you have. So mine is English US. So if you are British English, you can choose English UK, or if you're Canadian, you can use English Canadian. Hyphenation, I do use Hunspell. And occasionally we may need to go into this to update our hyphenation settings, but for now we don't need to do anything else. Then spelling, if you enable dynamic spelling, it really slows down your document. So I typically do not do this. However, if you maybe are an author and you want to do one more kind of spell check, you can definitely enable that for that particular document. Autocorrect, I don't have any autocorrect settings. There are some times that when I used to work in the corporate world, one of the companies I worked for was Swordlin and Company, and instead of having to type that out, I actually set an autocorrect. So anytime I typed SC space, it would automatically correct it to Swordlin and Company. So you can set up some autocorrect words if you use something frequently. Okay. Notes, I never change. Track changes, I very seldom will use track changes in InDesign. Story editor, I never change. Display performance, this is again up to you. When you first open any InDesign document, the default view is typical. And what that means is that sometimes the images are, all times your images in your document are a bit pixelated because it's not bringing in the high quality view. It's just bringing kind of a rough 72 dpi view of that image. This is great if you have a complex nonfiction book, maybe with a ton of photos, and the file is very large and it drags. Then you may not want to view the high quality, but I have a brand new super fast computer with a high speed graphics card. So I'm not worried about viewing it in typical. So I'm going to switch it to high quality. Again, that is, totally up to you. And you can, when you're in the document, you can always come back under view and switch between typical and high quality. If you choose fast, then there will be no graphics at all. All your graphic frames are just going to be X's, so you know that there's a graphic there. I never use that setting. And then here are some other view settings. You can actually adjust how everything is. I tell it to Greek type below 6 points instead of 7. And what that means is that when you're viewing something, and chances are you may never use a 6-point font, but if you do have a font smaller than 7 points, it's going to just make it look like a block line, so the text is not going to be readable. But if you change that to 6 points, I think that works better. Appearance of black, I never change this. File handling, I do change my recovery data. And this is because I have a large E drive, a large data drive instead of my C drive. So I am going to create a recovery folder. And I'm going to tell it to select folder. Okay. Always say preview images with documents. I definitely do this because I use Adobe Bridge often. And if you save the preview with the document, it's going to show up in Bridge. And I'm going to choose Auto Activate Adobe Fonts. And I think that's it under File Handling. And then Clipboard Handling. This one is probably the most important out of all of these settings. The default is when pasting text and tables from other applications, the default is text only, which means if you are placing or pasting something from a Word document, it is going to lose all your italics and bolds. Also, if you have any index markers, any styles, it's going to get rid of them all. We do not want that because we want our italics and bolds to come through. So always, always, all information should be checked. All right, so now we're going to click on OK. And now we're going to set up our workspace. Now, I'm going to set up my workspace. I'm probably going to add things that you may not necessarily want to add. And that's because I do a lot of complex nonfiction books. And so I do prefer to have some of the more advanced features in InDesign at my fingertips. But you do not have to do, I will show you the ones that are not that important. So you can determine whether you want to set them up or not. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is to set up your workspace. You go to Windows, Workspaces, and you can choose any of these as a base. All right, I'm not going to do that. Sometimes actually I think I do. All right, so what I'm going to do, just forget what I just said. I'm actually going to go to Windows, Workspace, and I'm going to choose the Typography Workspace, but I'm actually going to save this as a completely different workspace when I'm done, okay? So I'm going to tweak this to my liking. I have the Pages panel, which is very important. Then I like to include the Properties panel. So I am going to just open up under Window, Properties panel, and I'm going to drag and drop that right below my Pages panel. I also like to have the Info tab. So I'm going to open that up, and it's on my other screen here. And I'm going to drag and drop that right below my Properties panel. I also use something called Pre-Flight. And sometimes you have to think about where they're at in here. Output, pre-flight. And here is my pre-flight menu. And I am going to drag and drop that here. My layers panel, I'm going to keep. I am going to move my swatches panel out of this top. You'll see there's a line here. I'm actually going to remove that. I do not use CC libraries. It's good if you're on a team of people or if you're going across multiple computers and you share the same Adobe account. I find it kind of cumbersome, so I'm going to remove that. The next thing I'm going to add is my scripts panel, which is very, very, very important. Utilities, scripts. So here is my scripts panel, and there is an important script that I need to add, which I will talk about in just a minute. So I'm going to drop that down below my layers. I also, whoops, I want that here. So scripts, I also like to show my background tasks. So we are going to add that. I'm going to drop that right below scripts. And then I am going to add a links panel. So that is my first part of my workspace. So pages, which you will definitely need. So you'll want to include that. Properties, it's up to you. You may never use that tab. I don't use it that often, but I like to have it when needed. Info, I do use this occasionally and it just gives me numbers, but again, that one you may not find necessary. pre-flight. Yes, that's very important. That's going to tell us if our file has any errors, if it has any missing fonts, any missing graphics. So before I export a PDF for a client, I run a pre-flight check just to make sure everything is correct on the document. The layers panel, yes, you'll want your layers panel. Scripts, yes, you are going to run at least 2 scripts on every document. So once we get into using the template and setting up your book design, you're going to be using this. So definitely keep track of that. I like to have background tasks up because if I am generating a PDF that's taking a long time, it'll tell me what percentage it is complete. But it is not necessary. I don't use it that often, just when I'm generating a large PDF. So you can determine whether you want to include that or not. The links panel, yes, I highly recommended making sure you have the links panel because this is going to list every external asset you have in your document, including any images that you use throughout your document. So that's very important to me. And then this is kind of the first little section. So now we're going to work on the next one. It's going to be swatches, which we're going to keep. So these are all our color swatches. And then we are going to add a color palette thing. So we're just going to go here. And this just, you can create your own color here. So you can choose, from this little graph down here, what colors you want. And then I'm actually going to move my glyphs down here. And my text wrap, I am going to move in its own little category. So we'll worry about that later. So swatches, color, and then I am going to bring my stroke. So we're going to drop that into swatches, color, stroke. And then we are going to drop the gradient in that panel. So this is all related to colors, all right? So we've got gradients, we've got the color palette, we've got swatches panel, and we've got the stroke. So I bunched these all together for anything related to color. So you will, if you're going to do color documents, you will probably want to have all of these, but if you want to streamline this, definitely include the swatches and the stroke. You don't necessarily need the color or the gradient. All right, so the next one is going to be some of the more complex features of InDesign that I use. And these are some of the ones that you may not want to do. I definitely recommend keeping your hyperlinks because in back matter, when you're setting up a book, you want to include links, and this is how you do that in your hyperlinks panel. One that I do include that you probably do not want to include is, I've got to find where it's at. Sometimes some of these are not the most useful terms. So I've got to find where it's at. All right, that's an index. If you do a lot of complex nonfiction books and you're going to generate indexes, that's your index panel. If you are doing just regular novels, you will probably never do an index, so I wouldn't recommend adding that to your panel. Another one that you probably won't use is cross-references, okay? These are kind of related to index, kind of related to the TOC. This is where in your document you can say, see page so-and-so, and it will create an automatic link to a header. It works for ebooks as well, but again, this is only something I do in complex nonfictions, so you probably do not need to add that to your panel, okay? The next, and that's it for that panel. I am going to remove the story. I'm actually going to remove effects on its own. And I'm going to move text wrap down with effects. Now you'll definitely probably want text wrap. There are situations where you may use that, so we're going to keep that in. We're also going to add object styles, which are probably under the Style menu. Object styles you may not use, so if you're trying to declutter your toolbox, you may want to delete the object styles. I also use Align and the Transform tools. So I'm just going to drop that down here. And then Pathfinder as well. So sometimes I will use these as well. Align, you may never use. Pathfinder, you may have never used. So again, these are tools that you may decide not to add. All of these options right here are things that you do to a text frame or an object frame. Okay, so that's why I have them all bunched together. Okay, then the next panel is going to be our character and paragraph styles. So I'm just going to bring character styles here, and you'll definitely want these. So we got character, paragraph, and then we're going to have character styles, paragraph styles. We're going to keep our glyphs here. Okay. And then the last thing I add, which you may never need, and that is tables. All right. So I am going to add just a new area, do table. I'm going to do table styles, and then I'm going to do cell styles. Okay. And that is how I set up my InDesign workspace. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say new workspace, and I'm just going to call this Stephanie because this is going to be my workspace. It's going to save my workspace exactly as it appears here. Okay, so I'm going to click on OK, and you'll notice up here it says Stephanie. All right, let's say, and I do this often, let's say I accidentally pull something off. My character styles are gone and I need them. I close them, so it's gone here. Oh no, all you have to do is reset and it will open everything back up to where you had it. Okay. So that's it for workspaces. I hope that was helpful. You know what? Let's do one quick thing. This is just something that annoys me. It's not letting me. Hold on just a second. I'm on my other screen. Let's see if it. I'm trying to. I don't understand why it's not letting me select. See, there's a little arrow here, which means there is a drop-down menu for that tool. It is not letting me select it. So I will have to come try that later. I never use this color theme tool, and instead I use the eyedropper. So I'm actually trying to switch this to the eyedropper and then save my workspace again in hopes that it will automatically bring up the eyedropper tool instead of this color theme tool. There we go. All right, so I've got that now. I'm going to save it again, and you can save it on top of itself. And I'm hoping that that will automatically bring up my eyedropper. All right. All the other tools are fine as the default. All right. So I hope that's helpful in how to set up your InDesign workspace.